What if I told you that Edgar Cayce, the man called the Sleeping Prophet, left behind a set of revelations about leadership that had nothing to do with titles, corporate ladders, or political campaigns, and everything to do with the way a woman lives her daily life? In more than 14,000 documented readings, Cayce explored the nature of human potential, and buried in those pages are clues to what he called the magnetic field of influence, a quality that makes certain women command attention and respect the moment they walk into a room. He insisted that this presence wasn't something you were born with or without. It could be cultivated deliberately through specific daily practices. And here's the twist. These weren't grand, complicated strategies. They were deceptively simple habits, repeated over time, that aligned a woman's inner state with her highest spiritual frequency. Cayce believed that true leadership has nothing to do with controlling others. It's about embodying such a strong alignment between your inner truth and outer actions that people feel safer, stronger, and more purposeful simply by being in your presence. And according to his readings, women are uniquely positioned to access this form of influence because of the natural way their energy interacts with the collective field. But this potential, he warned, is often buried under layers of self-doubt, people-pleasing, and societal conditioning. The habits he revealed were designed to strip all of that away, bringing forward the version of you that not only takes up space in a room, but transforms it. Imagine walking into any setting, a boardroom, a family gathering, a community meeting, and without saying a word, people instinctively turn toward you, not because you're the loudest, not because you demand attention, but because there's something in your energy that signals steadiness, clarity, and authority. Cayce said this magnetic presence is not an accident. It is the byproduct of a disciplined inner life, one that is aligned with universal principles of truth, service, and self-mastery. In one of his most overlooked readings, Cayce spoke about 5 pillars that, when practiced daily, shift a woman's energy so profoundly that her influence extends beyond the limits of her immediate surroundings. He claimed these habits don't just change how people respond to you, they change the way you see yourself. And that inner shift, he insisted, is where real leadership begins. While modern culture often teaches women to focus on outer symbols of leadership, appearance, credentials, connections, Cayce believed the inner foundation was far more powerful and enduring. The first habit, which we'll explore in depth later, Cayce called intentional grounding, is the practice of starting each day by centering your mind and body before the world can scatter your attention. To Cayce, this was non-negotiable. Without it, he said, a woman's energy field would be reactive, shaped by external forces rather than her own will. With it, she would move through her day as a calm center of influence, unaffected by the emotional storms around her. He described this state as being the still water into which others see their own reflection more clearly. Cayce often emphasized that leadership is not a role you switch on when needed. It's an energy you carry all the time. And that energy is built in the private moments no one sees. The way you speak to yourself in the morning, the choices you make when no one is watching, the boundaries you set, even in small interactions. These are the places where the magnetic field of leadership is forged. He warned that many women undermine their own authority by living reactively, jumping from one demand to the next, allowing the loudest voice in the room to dictate their focus. His daily habits were designed to reverse that, anchoring a woman so firmly in her own center that external chaos could no longer pull her off course. What makes these habits so powerful, Cayce said, is that they work on multiple levels at once: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. They regulate the nervous system, sharpen the mind, clarify values, and connect you to what he called the source of right action. When all of these levels are in alignment, leadership stops being something you perform and becomes something you are. But here's where the story gets even more intriguing. Cayce didn't see these habits as new inventions. He traced them back to ancient spiritual lineages where women held respected positions as guides, healers, and decision-makers. In those cultures, daily practice was not a luxury. It was survival. It ensured that the women entrusted with influence could lead without being corrupted by ego or fear. Cayce believed that many women alive today, especially those feeling a pull toward independence and self-mastery, are the reincarnations of those same leaders, drawn back into the modern world to reawaken these principles. In this first part, we've only opened the door to what Cayce described as a leadership blueprint hidden in plain sight. Over the next sections, we'll step through each of the 5 daily habits, exploring not only what they are, but why they work, and how, when practiced consistently, they can transform a woman into a leader in any room she enters. And if Cayce's vision was correct, this kind of leadership might be exactly what the world is waiting for right now. Edgar Cayce believed that the first and most essential step toward becoming a leader in any environment is to master the art of what he called intentional grounding. Without this foundation, he said, the rest of the habits are like building a house on sand. Impressive for a while, but vulnerable to collapse the moment life's storms arrive. Intentional grounding is not simply about feeling calm. It's about anchoring yourself so deeply in your own energy that the opinions, moods, and chaos of others can't pull you off balance. In one of his readings, Cayce described it in a way that stays with you. Be the still water into which the world reflects. If you are stirred easily, the reflection becomes distorted, not only for you, but for those who look to you for guidance. Leadership, he explained, begins long before you step into the boardroom, sit at the family table, or address a group. It begins in the moments no one else sees, the first thoughts you choose upon waking, the first breath you take before speaking, the first posture you assume when walking into a room. These moments signal both to yourself and to the people around you, whether you are leading from a place of inner command or reacting to whatever energy happens to be present. Intentional grounding starts with presence. Cayce recommended that each morning, before engaging with the world, a woman should take at least 10 minutes to center herself in silence. This could be meditation, prayer, breath work, or simply sitting with a cup of tea while consciously setting intentions for the day. The method was less important than the mindset, to claim the day before the day claims you. Without this ritual, he said, you risk waking up and immediately stepping into someone else's narrative, answering emails, reacting to messages, letting the news dictate your emotional tone before you've even spoken to your own soul. What makes this habit transformative is the way it influences your energy field. Cayce believed that every person carries a subtle but powerful vibration that others can feel the moment they enter a space. Grounding aligns that vibration with clarity and stability, which is why grounded leaders often command attention without raising their voices or asserting authority. People feel it before they understand it. They sense that here is someone who cannot be easily shaken, someone whose presence creates order in the midst of uncertainty. Cayce also emphasized the physical aspect of grounding. He often advised walking barefoot on grass or soil in the morning, connecting directly with the Earth's electromagnetic field. This wasn't just poetic imagery. He saw it as a way to discharge the static energy of stress and draw in the stabilizing current of the planet itself. For those unable to do this daily, he suggested using breath as a grounding tool. Slow, deep inhales through the nose, long exhales through the mouth, imagining roots extending from the soles of the feet deep into the earth. This visualization, practiced consistently, creates a mental anchor you can return to, even in the busiest moments of the day. But grounding isn't just about calmness, it's about clarity. Cayce observed that when a woman enters a situation ungrounded, she becomes more susceptible to taking on the emotions of others. If someone is anxious, she feels anxious. If someone is aggressive, she becomes defensive. This reactive state not only drains personal energy, but also diminishes influence. A leader cannot lead if she is constantly being pulled into the current of other people's emotions. Grounding acts like a protective boundary, allowing her to remain open and empathetic without losing her center. One of the most fascinating aspects of Cayce's teaching on this habit is that it operates beyond the personal. He believed that a grounded individual influences the collective energy of a group, often without speaking a word. In situations of tension, a heated meeting, a family dispute, the grounded person becomes the emotional anchor, subtly guiding others toward balance. This is why, according to Cayce, grounding is not a selfish act. It's a form of service. Your centered presence becomes a safe harbor for those who are caught in emotional storms, and that is the kind of quiet power that defines true leadership. The long-term effects of intentional grounding go even deeper. Cayce claimed that over time, this daily practice strengthens a woman's intuition. By silencing the noise and stabilizing her internal state each morning, she clears the channel through which guidance and insight can flow. This intuitive clarity becomes a leader's greatest asset, enabling her to make decisions not just from logic, but from an inner knowing that often sees beyond the immediate circumstances. In the modern world, where constant distraction is the norm, intentional grounding can feel almost radical. It means choosing to start your day on your terms, aligning your mind and body with purpose before you give your attention to anyone else. It means valuing your inner state as the foundation for everything you will create, influence, or lead that day. And, as Cayce insisted, it is not optional if you wish to carry the kind of presence that transforms any room you walk into. We've explored the first habit, your foundation. In the next part, we'll uncover the second daily practice Cayce believed was essential for female leaders, a habit that transforms not just your presence, but the way people respond to you before you even speak. If grounding is the foundation of leadership, Edgar Cayce believed that speech is the architecture we build upon it. He often reminded his clients that words are not just sounds, they are vibrations, and vibrations carry power. The way a woman speaks, her tone, choice of words, timing, can instantly establish her as a leader or diminish her presence before she even finishes her sentence. According to Cayce, women who master intentional speech command respect without ever needing to demand it. In one of his lesser-known readings, Cayce warned that careless speech is one of the fastest ways to dissipate personal energy. Every unnecessary complaint, every piece of idle gossip, every sarcastic remark is like a small leak in the vessel of influence. Over time, those leaks add up, and the magnetic presence a woman works so hard to cultivate begins to fade. But the opposite is also true. Words spoken with clarity and purpose can amplify her influence, strengthen trust, and align her with the role of a natural leader. Intentional speech, as Cayce described it, begins long before the words leave your mouth. It starts with awareness, being fully present in a conversation, listening more than you speak, and choosing responses that move the interaction toward clarity rather than chaos. A leader's words are not reactive, they are deliberate. They're rooted in values and aimed at building bridges, even in moments of disagreement. This doesn't mean avoiding hard truths. In fact, Cayce insisted that leaders must speak the truth. But the truth, when delivered without malice and in the right tone, becomes a force for alignment rather than division. He also noted something fascinating. The energy behind the words matters more than the words themselves. Two people can say the same sentence, but if one is grounded in self-assurance and the other is speaking from insecurity, the impact is completely different. Cayce encouraged women to pause before speaking, especially in high-stakes situations, to ensure their words were coming from their center, not from an emotional reaction. This pause, he said, creates a subtle shift in energy that others can feel. It signals authority, self-control, and thoughtfulness. One of the practical exercises Cayce recommended was what he called verbal calibration. For a week, he suggested, observe your speech as if you were an impartial witness. Notice how often you use filler words, how your tone changes when you feel challenged, and whether your language uplifts or diminishes the people you're speaking to. The goal isn't perfection, but awareness. Once you see the patterns, you can choose to replace habits that weaken your presence with ones that strengthen it. Cayce placed special emphasis on the power of encouragement. He believed that a true leader amplifies the strengths of others, and one of the most direct ways to do that is through intentional, specific praise. This isn't flattery, it's recognition rooted in truth. When a leader notices and acknowledges the best in people, it not only inspires loyalty, but also elevates the entire environment. In a meeting, a compliment about someone's insight can shift the dynamic of the room. In a family setting, affirming someone's effort can diffuse tension and foster cooperation. Another layer of intentional speech is the ability to frame challenges in a way that inspires action rather than fear. Cayce warned that leaders who dwell on problems without offering a path forward drain the energy of those around them. By contrast, leaders who acknowledge difficulties while holding a vision for resolution create an atmosphere where solutions can emerge. This habit of speaking possibility into difficult situations is one of the traits Cayce identified in every great leader he studied. But intentional speech is not just about what we say to others, it's also about what we say to ourselves. Cayce repeatedly emphasized that self-talk sets the tone for all other communication. If a woman constantly criticizes herself internally, that vibration will subtly color her words, no matter how polished they sound. Leaders, he said, must practice speaking to themselves with the same respect and encouragement they would offer someone they deeply value. This self-alignment creates a resonance that others can sense, even if they can't explain it. In the modern world, where constant chatter fills our devices and our days, the discipline of intentional speech can feel rare, almost radical. But that rarity is exactly what makes it so powerful. In a noisy room, the person who speaks with precision, purpose, and calmness naturally draws attention. People lean in because the energy feels different, measured, grounded, and trustworthy. Cayce's vision of leadership wasn't about dominating a conversation. It was about owning the quality of the vibration you bring to it. And when intentional speech is combined with intentional grounding, the result is a presence so steady and compelling that people instinctively look to you for direction. With the first two habits, grounding and intentional speech, you've established both the inner and outer framework of leadership presence. But Cayce believed the third habit is what turns influence into inspiration. It's the practice that makes people not only respect you, but want to follow you. According to Edgar Cayce, nothing erodes a leader's credibility faster than inconsistency between what she says and what she does. He believed that true authority, the kind that lasts, comes from embodied consistency. This isn't about perfection, it's about alignment. When your actions match your words and your words match your values, people feel safe to trust you. Cayce often repeated that trust is the real currency of leadership, and without it, influence is temporary at best. Embodied consistency means that the leadership you display in public is the same leadership you live in private. Cayce warned that the most magnetic leaders in history were not those who mastered grand gestures, but those whose smallest choices reflected their deepest principles. If you speak about integrity in the workplace, but cut corners when no one's watching, people may not catch the specifics, but they will feel the dissonance. Humans are wired to sense when something is off, and in leadership, even subtle contradictions weaken the field of respect. In one of his more practical readings, Cayce described a process for cultivating this habit. He encouraged women to identify their three core values, the non-negotiables that define who they are at their best. Every day, she should ask herself, did my actions reflect these values today? Did my words reflect them? Did my thoughts? This daily self-check acts like a compass, keeping her on course even when life's circumstances try to pull her away. Consistency also creates predictability, and predictability is deeply reassuring to those you lead. Cayce explained that leadership is not just about making the right decisions, it's about creating a sense of stability in the people around you. When others know they can count on you to respond with steadiness, even under pressure, they instinctively relax and open to your guidance. This doesn't mean you never adapt or change. It means that even in change, you remain anchored to the same principles. One of the ways Cayce saw inconsistency creep in was through overcommitment. When a woman tries to be everything to everyone, she inevitably has to break promises to herself or to others. This undermines the trust she's built. That's why he urged leaders to master the art of the conscious yes and the honest no. If you commit to something, follow through with the same care you would for your most important project. And if you can't commit, decline with clarity rather than leaving your word hanging in uncertainty. He also highlighted the physical dimension of embodied consistency. Leadership isn't only communicated through language, it's broadcast through body language, tone, and presence. If your words express confidence but your shoulders slump, your voice wavers, or your eyes avoid contact, people will pick up on the contradiction. Cayce recommended small but powerful daily practices to align body and message. Stand tall, breathe deeply before speaking, and make eye contact with intention, not intimidation. Consistency, in Cayce's view, also meant showing up the same way with everyone, whether speaking to a CEO, a family member, or a stranger. He believed that true leaders erase the artificial hierarchy of worthiness and treat every interaction as an opportunity to embody their principles. This universal respect not only builds trust, but also creates an invisible field of dignity around the leader. People feel valued in her presence, and in return, they elevate their own behavior. Over time, embodied consistency builds something even more powerful than influence. It builds legacy. Cayce observed that leaders who live this way inspire others, not just in the moment, but long after the interaction is over. Their example becomes a standard for others to aspire to. And because the consistency is rooted in authentic values rather than image, it can withstand challenges, scrutiny, and even failure without crumbling. Cayce was clear that this habit requires discipline. It's not enough to practice it when things are going well. Its real test is in moments of stress, disappointment, or temptation. He advised women to think of these moments not as failures, but as opportunities to strengthen the muscle of alignment. Every time you choose to act in accordance with your values, even when it's hard, you deepen the trust others place in you, and the trust you place in yourself. When combined with grounding and intentional speech, embodied consistency becomes the glue that holds leadership presence together. It ensures that your influence is not just a spark that fades, but a steady flame that others can depend on. And once that flame is steady, Cayce believed, you're ready for the fourth habit, a practice that turns personal leadership into a source of collective empowerment. For Edgar Cayce, leadership was never about holding power. It was about distributing it. He believed that the mark of a truly sovereign woman was not how much influence she could gather for herself, but how much she could awaken in the people around her. Cayce often said that when a leader's presence leaves others feeling smaller, that's not leadership, that's control. Real leaders leave people taller than they found them. He called this daily habit the practice of empowering others, and he considered it one of the most transformative forces a woman could bring into any room. It is the art of seeing people not for who they are in this moment, but for who they are capable of becoming, and then interacting with them from that place of possibility. To Cayce, this wasn't just kindness. It was a deliberate act that reshaped the collective field of a group, whether that group was a family, a business team, or a community. The first step in this habit is perception. Cayce urged women to train themselves to notice strengths and potential in others, even when those qualities aren't yet fully formed. He believed that many people carry gifts they can't see in themselves because no one has reflected them back clearly. A leader with the ability to spot these hidden assets becomes a catalyst for growth simply by acknowledging them. This is why, he said, a single sincere compliment or expression of belief can change the course of someone's life. The second step is investment, not necessarily financial, but energetic. This could mean offering guidance, providing opportunities, or simply creating space for someone to step into a role they're ready for, even if they don't feel ready. Cayce warned that empowerment requires letting go of control. You can't empower others while micromanaging them. Trust is essential. By giving people the room to stretch into new abilities, you communicate confidence in their capacity, and people tend to rise to the level of belief you place in them. Empowerment, however, is not about flattery or false encouragement. Cayce was adamant that it must be rooted in truth. Empty praise, he said, weakens trust because people sense when words are hollow. Genuine empowerment acknowledges both strengths and the areas where growth is needed, but always frames challenges as surmountable. In this way, you create a dynamic where people feel both seen and supported, even when the feedback is difficult. One of the most profound aspects of this habit, according to Cayce, is the ripple effect it creates. Empowerment is contagious. When one person feels trusted and valued, they are more likely to extend that same energy to others. Over time, this can transform the culture of an entire environment, shifting it from competition and scarcity to collaboration and abundance. In a team setting, this means fewer power struggles and more creative problem solving. In a family, it means children who grow up knowing their worth and their ability to contribute meaningfully to the world. Cayce also spoke about the spiritual dimension of empowerment. He believed that when you help someone connect to their own potential, you are actually helping them align with their soul's purpose. This in turn strengthens the collective consciousness because each aligned individual becomes a stronger contributor to the whole. He often likened it to tuning an instrument. When one instrument in the orchestra is brought into harmony, the entire piece sounds better. Practicing empowerment daily can be as simple as asking yourself, who can I uplift today? This doesn't always require grand gestures. It could be a word of encouragement to a colleague before a presentation, a reminder to a friend of how far they've come, or simply listening without distraction when someone needs to be heard. Cayce insisted that leadership is most powerful in these small, consistent acts, the ones that over time redefine how people see themselves. However, Cayce also warned about the shadow side of this habit, enabling. Empowerment is about helping people step into their own strength, not doing the work for them or shielding them from the natural consequences of their choices. A leader who confuses empowerment with rescuing can unintentionally keep others dependent. True empowerment trusts people to face their challenges and supports them in developing the resilience to overcome them. When a woman consistently empowers others, Cayce said, her influence expands exponentially. People not only respect her, they want to be in her presence because being around her makes them feel capable and inspired. And when empowerment becomes part of a leader's daily rhythm, her legacy is no longer measured just in personal achievements, but in the success stories of those she has lifted along the way. With grounding, intentional speech, embodied consistency, and the practice of empowering others, you have 4 of Cayce's 5 transformational habits. But the 5th, which we'll explore next, is the force that binds them all together, a habit that Cayce believed turns leadership into something more than influence. It turns it into a living example of the highest human potential. For Edgar Cayce, the ultimate key to lasting leadership was not charisma, not skill, not even influence. It was purpose. He believed that a woman anchored in her life's purpose radiates a kind of clarity and conviction that no amount of training or technique can replicate. And while many people think of purpose as a grand, once-in-a-lifetime revelation, Cayce saw it as something that must be aligned with daily. He called this habit daily alignment with purpose, and he considered it the glue that binds all the other habits together. Grounding, intentional speech, consistency, and empowering others are powerful on their own, but without a clear sense of why you are doing them, their impact can fade. Purpose transforms them from good habits into unstoppable forces. Cayce described purpose as a spiritual compass. It is the deeper reason behind every choice you make, the thread that runs through every chapter of your life. And here's the part most people miss. Purpose isn't something you find once and then forget. It's something you reconnect with every single day, especially on the days when you feel tired, discouraged, or distracted. Without this reconnection, even the most disciplined leader can drift into autopilot, going through the motions without the spark that makes others want to follow. Daily alignment with purpose begins with asking a simple but profound question each morning. Who am I choosing to be today, and why? Cayce advised writing this down, not as a list of tasks, but as a statement of intention. For example, instead of "I have 3 meetings," you might write, "I'm showing up today as a calm, clear communicator who inspires confidence in others." The goal is to define your leadership energy before the day defines it for you. Cayce also encouraged reviewing your purpose through multiple lenses: personal, relational, and collective. Personally, what are you here to experience and express in this lifetime? Relationally, how do you want to impact the people you encounter today? Collectively, how does your work and presence contribute to the larger good? When these 3 align, Cayce believed you tap into what he called divine momentum, a flow state where your actions carry more weight because they are in harmony with universal laws. One of the most striking things Cayce said about purpose is that it doesn't have to be monumental to be meaningful. Your purpose might be to lead a global movement, or it might be to bring integrity, kindness, and vision into your immediate sphere. What matters is not the size of the stage, but the depth of your commitment. When you live your purpose fully, people feel it. They may not be able to articulate why your presence affects them, but they respond to it instinctively. The practice of daily alignment also serves as a filter for decision-making. Cayce taught that when faced with a choice, you should ask, does this action move me closer to or further from my purpose? This simple question can save enormous amounts of time and energy, keeping you focused on what truly matters. Leaders who skip this step often find themselves scattered, chasing opportunities that look good on the surface, but pull them away from their core mission. Cayce warned that purpose can be easily obscured by the noise of modern life. Urgent emails, social media distractions, other people's expectations. That's why the habit must be deliberate. He recommended setting aside a specific time each day to reconnect with it, ideally in the morning when your mind is still clear. This could be through meditation, journaling, prayer, or even a quiet walk. The form is flexible, the consistency is not. When a woman commits to aligning with her purpose daily, something profound happens. Her leadership stops being situational and becomes a way of being. People no longer follow her just because of what she does. They follow because of who she is. Her grounded presence, intentional words, consistent actions, and empowering influence all become expressions of a deeper calling. And in a world starved for authenticity, that kind of leadership is magnetic. Cayce's vision was that women practicing these 5 habits, grounding, intentional speech, embodied consistency, empowering others, and daily alignment with purpose, would become anchors in any room they entered. They wouldn't need to compete for attention or prove their worth. Their influence would be self-evident, and as more women embodied this level of leadership, the collective consciousness itself would rise. Workplaces would shift from fear-based hierarchies to trust-based collaboration. Families would become stronger, more stable, more loving. Communities would thrive under leaders who lead not from ego, but from alignment with something greater than themselves. In the end, Cayce believed that leadership was never about the position you hold. It was about the energy you bring. And by practicing these 5 habits daily, any woman could transform that energy into a force that changes rooms, changes lives, and perhaps even changes the course of history. If this message inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ready to step into their own power. Your voice in the comments matters too. Tell us which habit spoke to you the most. Let's grow this community of leaders together.